Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the joint village board and planning commission meeting for the village of Landon to order on Thursday, December 19th, 2024 at 6 p.m. Item 2, pledge of allegiance. Guys, move your headgear.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you haven't already, please silence your phones. Roll call, Plan Commission, Grimm.
Here.
Newman. Here. Janice.
Here.
Lake.
Here.
Hayleitner.
Here.
Levold.
Here.
Yates is present. Village board, we have Lake.
Here.
Galatola Roby.
Here.
Newman. Here. Yates again is here. Moore.
Here.
Grenier.
Here.
And Summers maybe just walked in, maybe?
No.
Um. Statement of public notice. Has been posted.
That's what was it. Sorry.
Thank you. Item number 5, public hearing for Wit Diversified Interest LLC, Chemrite Copac Inc. for a conditional use permit to keep a well for production at 19725 West Edgewood Drive, Landon, Wisconsin 53046. Motion to the public hearings.
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing.
I'll second.
We have a motion, a couple of seconds. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll open the public hearing. We'll start with Mr. De La Mora first, and then we will move on to village engineer for comments as well.
The purpose of the proceeding this evening is to consider the application that has been submitted for a conditional use permit to continue operations essentially as they have been maintained using a shallow well at the business premises. Previously, the business had a conditional use permit, which has now lapsed. And the reason for the plan commission being here and the board is that under our ordinances with regards to utilization of municipal water, all businesses, all residents have to connect to municipal water to the extent that there is access to that service. In this particular situation, the property owner has connected to municipal water. However, that connection is limited to the domestic uses within the property for staff and not used for production purposes. The conditional use permit that was previously issued was issued based on the representations made to the village that by December 1, 2024, there would be an operation, a deep well. We have recently learned, for reasons which are not clear on the record, that no deep well has been established, and I can't speak to any plans with regard to a deep well. Tonight, the hearing will be heard by the board and also the plan commission. Procedurally, it will be up to the plan commission to make a recommendation to the board for the board to consider. If approval is granted, various conditions can be imposed on those. And to the extent that there are questions about those conditions, I'll be happy to speak to them. But in the interest of time, at this time, I would just yield to Ben Wood, the village engineer, who will give you some technical background information about the circumstances of this facility and their application and his reaction to some aspects of their application.
Thank you, Hector. So their application document, which I believe everyone, it's got this form cover sheet, everybody has that on here. One simple comment here out of the gate is that I think the location of the well should be added to the plat map. I think that should be fairly straightforward. And then I have several other, comments just on, the form of what they would like to attach here to the conditional use. I've made a series of comments to the form they submitted, for the sake of sharing it with everyone here tonight. I provided the same intent, by marking up the original conditional use permit. The only difference, is I would like to read you those just because they're more, cohesive and concise, whereas the version where I mark up, their application here, my comments are kind of broken apart and interspersed within the paragraphs they submitted. And, for the, board and the plan commission's sake here, I'm just gonna read them in the form that they're most, cohesive here. The intent of my comments is to add some specifics, about the construction of the well, the circumstances that the village finds itself in currently with the water utility, and, interject some other requirements that have the village has implemented through the ordinances over the last couple of years. So with that, I'm just going to read my comments directly. So in the original conditional use permit, there's a section 2A that just covers use of the private water supply. And I suggest adding a few paragraphs to what's already there as follows. The grantee acknowledges that the existing private well draws from the same shallow aquifer as the Village of Lannon's municipal water utility wells, and the village's wells are permitted by the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources for a maximum withdrawal rate, and that Lannon's municipal wells have priority over privately owned wells, and that any impact caused by grantee to the village's ability to withdraw its permitted rate shall be remedied by the grantee. Such remedies may include reducing the rate of withdrawal of the grantee's well or abandoning the grantee's well, or other remedies as deemed appropriate by the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. I'll pause there. Basically, I've had a call clarifying with the DNR, not just for Chemrite, but for another situation that came up. When the DNR permits municipal wells, they give you, they define a maximum flow rate that the municipal well is permitted to withdraw. And the municipality is like granted by right the ability to take that flow rate 24/7 if they need to, whatever. So any accusations of, hey, the municipal's well is affecting this private well over here, basically don't matter, because when the DNR permitted that, that's like ultimate priority. What's also kind of implied within this paragraph is if there's a dispute either by the grantee that the village's well is causing a problem or vice versa, DNR is the authority in that matter. But what I'm saying in this paragraph doesn't grant the village any additional rights that the DNR has not already granted the village. It's just being put into this form just so that both parties kind of acknowledge this is how it works right up front out of the gate, and it's kind of put there to prevent future disputes over it in the future, if you will. So even when I say such remedies may include not inventing any new or extra requirements, that's just within the realm of what Wisconsin DNR would do. And so it's just kind of setting that as defining the playing field for everybody here. Next paragraph that I suggest adding. The existing private well draws water from the shallow aquifer. The depth of the well is blank feet. Would ask the applicant to fill in some of the blanks here. The well is pumped at a flow rate of blank gallons per minute. The flow rate is regulated by, and I suggest that they fill in, but I took a stab at making an assumption here. The well pump, which is a fixed speed and flow rate pump. In order to change flow rate, the pump impeller would need to be replaced. Again, that's all an assumption, but what I'm driving at there is what came up at the last meeting was a question of, well, does the Chemrite well even meet the definition by DNR of a high capacity well or not, or is it just a normal well? I think adding in some of those data points, along with what it would take to change the capabilities of that well, it's all being asked for so that everyone just knows relative to that DNR definition of the high capacity well, whether it meets that definition or not. And what it would take to change the well and potentially change the classification of it. I also put here, the well operates between blank and blank hours per day, thinking total hours, not time of day. This is controlled by, and I would like them to add operators, manual startup, automatic controls. After being treated, the water, would ask them to revise any and all of this. Discharges to a storage tank on site or is directly pumped to the manufacturing process. Part of that lays the groundwork for the village to understand if it were to entertain selling water to the facility in the future, to understand how they use the water. And that would be the justification for either amending and continuing the conditional use in the future if the village cannot meet those parameters, or that gives the village a target as it's contemplating its third source of supply of making sure, hey, we gotta provide X gallons per day. That they use it at this flow rate, they use it this many hours a day. It goes to a holding tank on site or it goes direct into the process, etc. Paragraph 3 that I suggest adding, wastewater generated from the manufacturing production process is transferred to a holding tank, pumped and hauled to a treatment plant by a private contractor that is regulated and licensed by fill in the blank. I'm not sure if that's DHS, DNR, somebody else, but I would at least like to define that just again to establish kind of the situation as is and avoid future tussles over anything in that regard. The specific treatment plants, what I'm trying to get at is the ultimate destination of where the hauler takes it. The specific treatment plant is at the discretion of the contracted hauler, but is frequently fill in the blank, name the locations if appropriate. Again, what that's driving at is kind of setting the baseline conditions for one, I think to address some of the village's questions in the past about ultimately wanting to just verify that the waste is being handled responsibly and in compliance with whatever agency there. And for two, there's been conversations in the past, if the village were to sell municipal water to the facility in the future, is there any potential for the village to also take its wastewater flow or not? And some of this information at least just, again, establishes what the situations are now and perhaps gives the village an understanding, I guess, one, some comfort that it's verified that it's being handled responsibly. And for two, maybe gives the village something to think about in the future. Let's see, of the original conditional use, there's a section 2B, which covers connection to the municipal water system. That really covered the language previously. That's kind of the premise for the amendment here, which is, hey, you have to drill a deep well or connect to the village system by December 2024 or else. Understanding that's the subject of the amendment here, I suggest adding a paragraph as follows. As of December 2024, the Village of Land and Municipal Water Utility is exploring the addition of a third source of municipal water supply for its system. The third source is being planned with enough capacity to support the demands of Chemrite. When the village secures and implements that source, which could be as soon as December 2025 to December 2027, the village will have incurred certain costs that would enable the village to have adequate capacity to supply Kenwright's water demands related to production. Therefore, when the third source has been secured by the village of Lannon, the village shall provide the owner of the Kenwright well with notice of the availability of municipal water that includes the reliable flow rate, pressure, and water quality to be expected. If the village's capacity meets or exceeds the patterns of water use, not quality, of Kenwright's private well as identified in this CUP revision, then Kenwright and the village shall terminate this CUP, and Kenwright shall be required to connect to the municipal water source in accordance with Village Ordinance Section 74-157A, unless a new CUP is applied for and approved by the village. The reason for saying if the village's capacity meets or exceeds the patterns of water use, not quality, is I know Ron and the company have invested a lot of money into on-site treatment systems that treat the water quality way beyond a municipal standard. And what I'm kind of saying here is that we're talking about the potential to replace the, I'll call it the raw water source from their shallow well existing to potentially municipal source in the future. While the municipal source water might be a higher quality than their current private well, frankly, it's going to be comparable. And I wouldn't want somebody on a future technicality to say, well, since you can't treat it to the point that our on-site super high-tech treatment system treats it, we're not going to buy your water. This is kind of saying this would be a replacement of their source water or raw water, not a replacement of their whole treatment system. Again, this paragraph harkens back to the paragraph before about how much water they use, how many hours a day, and would kind of be part of the premise for reviewing this once the third source is in place and available. And this paragraph also just acknowledges the reality that, look, when the village incurs the cost to construct and connect to that third source, it's being planned already with enough volume for Kenwright. And you know, it just acknowledges that since the village is making that investment, albeit regardless of whether or not you cooperate, because that's just wise planning of the utility. But since the village is contemplating making that investment, once that investment is made, that it would at least prompt the conversation again of, okay, now that the village would have capacity, is it logical for them to connect? Lastly, paragraph 2C of the original conditional use covers permits, licenses, and testing. I just suggest adding that the village has since implemented a requirement for a private well operation permit. That be a requirement for them to obtain that permit also. The significance behind that is basically the well gets inspected by a licensed well professional to say that your well is up to current DNR codes for well construction. And then adding another paragraph to this section just to reinforce rights that the village already has in the ordinance. The village will have access to inspect and verify the plumbing arrangement through the cross connection control program identified in village ordinance section 74-180 and 74-182. Basically, to reiterate what Hector has already said, they've connected their domestic water use plumbing to the municipal system. The well is limited to production use. And I believe village ordinance says, gosh, is it every 2 years?
Every year, I think.
There's a prescribed interval in the ordinances, and the ordinances mimic DNR requirements that the village has to inspect, do a cross control inspection. So it would just be, you know, verifying at prescribed intervals that those two water systems within the facility are separated and are plumbed together through any work they may have undertaken in between the intervals. So that kind of summarizes the intent of all my comments. Again, I marked up 2 different documents. That was the most cohesive one. The markup of the document that they actually applied for here has the same intent, just kind of chopped up and rearranged in the various paragraphs that are appropriate based on how that was drafted.